At 2:47 p.m., Julian Harth had 13 minutes left before signing away his empire, until the woman he'd never bothered to see spoke the words that would change both their lives forever. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now let us begin. The sunrise over Central Park was supposed to be worth $40 million. That's what Julian Harth had paid for this view, floor-to-ceiling windows that turned Manhattan into a living painting where dawn broke over the reservoir in shades of amber and rose gold. But on this Tuesday morning, the sunrise was just another countdown. Another reminder that by 3 p.m., none of this would be his anymore. Julian stood in his boxer shorts and a wrinkled undershirt, staring at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. When had he gotten so old? 42 wasn't supposed to look like this, gray creeping through his temples, shadows carved beneath his eyes like bruises, a tremor in his hands that no amount of whiskey could steady. He reached for his tie, the burgundy Hermes his ex-wife had given him back when she still believed in him, and tried 3 times to knot it before his fingers simply gave up. The tie fell to the marble counter. He left it there. The penthouse spread out behind him like a museum of his former life. 12,000 square feet of imported Italian marble, floating staircases, art pieces he'd bought at auction without bothering to learn the artists' names. Everything curated by a decorator he'd hired and never met. Beautiful, empty, silent, except for the hum of the city 37 floors below and the ticking of a clock he suddenly wanted to destroy. On his desk in the study, the documents waited. 143 pages that would reduce Julian Harth, founder and former CEO of Harth Technologies, the man Forbes had called the algorithm king, the self-made billionaire who'd built a tech empire from a Columbia dorm room to nothing. Bankruptcy. The word tasted like metal in his mouth. His phone sat dark on the nightstand. Once, it had never stopped buzzing investors, reporters, rivals, friends who weren't really friends. Now it was silent. They'd all seen the headlines. They'd all watched him fall. Harth Technologies founder implicated in $684 million fraud scheme. Billionaire's empire crumbles. Investors demand answers. From algorithm king to bankruptcy. The fall of Julian Harth. He hadn't committed fraud. But he'd trusted the man who had his COO, his college roommate, the person he'd called brother. Trevor had built the scheme so carefully that by the time Julian discovered it, the prosecutors were already building their case against both of them. It didn't matter that Julian hadn't known. It didn't matter that he'd been betrayed. In the court of public opinion, ignorance was just another word for guilt. The settlement was the only way out. Sign away everything. Take the bankruptcy. Maybe avoid prison. Julian walked to his kitchen, opened the Sub-Zero refrigerator his chef used to stock daily, and found it empty, except for a bottle of Grey Goose and a container of Chinese takeout from 4 days ago. He'd fired the chef last week. Fired everyone he could, trying to stop the bleeding. But you can't stop an empire from falling once gravity takes hold. He poured vodka into a coffee mug and drank it at the window, watching the city wake up below him. Somewhere down there, people were living normal lives. Going to work. Kissing their kids goodbye. Worried about mortgages and subway delays. And what to make for dinner. Simple problems. Human problems. He couldn't remember the last time his problems had been human-sized. The intercom buzzed. 6 a.m. Exactly. Julian barely glanced at the screen before pressing the button to allow entry. She was always on time. 3 years. Never once late. What was her name again? Maria? No. Something else. He'd never asked. Never needed to. She came, she cleaned, she left. That's how it worked. Across the city, Elena Morales had been awake since 4:30 a.m. Her alarm hadn't woken her. She'd been staring at the ceiling of her Bronx studio apartment for an hour, doing math in her head. Rent, $1,400. Electricity, $120. Phone bill, $85. Money wired to Guatemala for Maria's school, $600. Food, Subway, the small costs that added up like grains of sand until they became a mountain, another $400. And that was before the medical bills from her mother's surgery last month. 2 jobs. She worked 2 jobs, and the math still didn't work. Elena swung her legs out of bed, her body aching in that deep way that never quite left anymore. 38 years old, and she felt 60. She moved quietly through her morning routine: instant coffee, a shower that never got quite hot enough, the same jeans and gray shirt she wore to every cleaning job. In the mirror, she saw her mother's face looking back at her, the same tired eyes, the same determined set to her jaw. "Cuando vienes a casa, mommy?" Maria's voice on the video call was small and hopeful, her 12-year-old face pressed close to the phone screen. Behind her, Elena could see her mother's small house in Guatemala City, the familiar cracks in the yellow walls, the sound of morning traffic already building outside. "Soon, mi amor," Elena said, forcing brightness into her voice. "I promise. How's school?" "Boring. Abuela made pupusas yesterday. I saved you one." Maria held up a drawing: a stick figure woman with a heart on her chest, labeled, "Mama, for when you come home." Elena's throat tightened. 3 years. She'd been in New York for 3 years, and the money she sent back kept them alive, but the distance was killing something in both of them. "I love it, Corazon. I love you. Be good for Abuela. I have to go to work now." "At the rich man's house?" "Yes." "Is he nice?" Elena paused. He pays on time. That's what matters." After Maria hung up, Elena sat for a moment in the silence of her studio apartment. On the subway ride from the Bronx to the Upper East Side, she let herself disappear into the crowd. That was the trick of survival in this city: learning to be invisible. She sat with her cleaning supplies bag on her lap, her building access card hanging from a lanyard around her neck, and watched Manhattan transform outside the windows, from concrete and struggle to glass and steel, from her world to his. She knew more about Julian Harth than he would ever know about her. 3 years of mornings in his penthouse had taught her his rhythms. He drank his coffee black, no sugar, in a specific mug he never washed himself. He paced when he was stressed, always clockwise around the living room. He had nightmares: she'd found his sheets soaked with sweat more than once. He kept a photo in his desk drawer of a woman who must have been his ex-wife, though he'd turned it face down months ago. He'd never once asked Elena her name. She was furniture to him, functional, necessary, invisible, and some days, that invisibility was the only thing that kept her safe. In Guatemala City, before she'd immigrated, Elena had been a legal secretary at a firm downtown. She'd been good at it, sharp with contracts, fluent in English and Spanish, respected by the lawyers she supported. But when her mother got sick, and Maria needed better schools, and the violence in their neighborhood made every day a gamble, Elena had made a choice. She'd left her profession, her dignity, her identity, and crossed the border to become someone who cleaned up after people who would never see her as their equal. Some sacrifices you make for love don't feel noble, they just feel like disappearing. The train pulled into the 77th Street station. Elena climbed the stairs to street level and walked the 3 blocks to Julian Harth's building, past doormen who nodded but never spoke to her, through a lobby of marble and mirrors that reflected a woman she sometimes didn't recognize. The elevator rose 37 floors. The doors opened directly into the penthouse, a security feature for privacy that always made Elena feel like she was entering another planet. And today, as she stepped inside at exactly 6 a.m., she knew immediately that something was different. The penthouse looked like a crime scene. Papers everywhere. Documents scattered across the floor. The desk. The coffee table. Empty bottles. Whiskey. Vodka. Wine. The air smelled stale, like desperation and sleeplessness. And in the middle of it all, standing at the window in an undershirt and dress pants, was Julian Harth. He didn't turn when she entered, didn't acknowledge her presence, just stared out at the city like a man looking at his own grave. Elena set down her cleaning supplies, her heart squeezing with something she didn't want to name. Pity? Recognition? She'd read the news on the subway. Everyone in New York knew what was happening to Julian Harth. The fraud, the lawsuits, the fall. And here he was, still just a man, broken and alone in a $40 million penthouse that couldn't save him. She began to clean, moving around him like water around a stone, and wondered if today would be the day he finally saw her. The clock on the wall read 6:15 a.m. In less than 9 hours, his world would end. Elena didn't know it yet, but hers was about to change forever. Have you ever felt invisible in your own life, like the work you do, The sacrifices you make go unseen by the people who matter most? Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and your stories matter here. The morning dissolved into a fog of silence and routine that wasn't routine at all. Elena moved through the penthouse like a ghost haunting her own life. She collected the empty bottles first, 7 in total, which explained the hollowness in Julian's eyes. She stacked the scattered documents carefully, not reading them but noticing the letterheads. Law firms, investment banks, the New York State Attorney General's office. Words jumped out at her despite herself. Settlement, liability, asset forfeiture, bankruptcy proceedings. She'd seen these words before, in another life, in another language, though the legal terminology was nearly identical. Julian hadn't moved from the window. He stood there for 2 hours, statue still, occasionally lifting a coffee mug to his lips, only to find it empty. Around 8 a.m., he finally walked to his bedroom and emerged 20 minutes later in a charcoal suit that hung slightly loose on his frame. He'd lost weight. The burgundy tie was crooked, knotted with the carelessness of a man who'd stopped caring about details. He looked at Elena for half a second through her, really, and walked out without a word. The penthouse exhaled. Elena worked methodically through the rooms, but her mind was elsewhere. With Maria, who'd asked when she was coming home. With her mother, whose medical bills were stacking up faster than Elena could pay them. With the impossible mathematics of her life that never quite added up to enough. She was wiping down the kitchen counters when her phone buzzed. A text from her second job, the hospital where she worked night shifts as a custodian. Elena, can you cover the ICU tonight? Rosa called in sick. Double overtime. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Double overtime meant she could send extra money home. But it also meant no sleep between jobs, meant pushing her body past what it could reasonably endure. Again. She typed back, yes. Always yes. Because what other choice did she have? At 1:45 p.m., Julian returned to the penthouse. He wasn't alone. A man in an expensive suit followed him inside, late 50s, silver hair, the kind of confident posture that came from decades of winning. Elena recognized him from previous visits. Richard something, Julian's lawyer. It's the right move, Julian, Richard was saying, his voice carrying that particular blend of sympathy and impatience that lawyers specialized in. I know it's not what you wanted, but it's the only way forward. Sign the settlement, declare bankruptcy, and in 5 years, you can rebuild. But if you fight this, if you go to trial, you're looking at prison time. Real prison time. Julian's jaw was clenched so tight, Elena could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. He nodded once, sharp and bitter. The other parties will be on video conference at 3 p.m. sharp, Richard continued, pulling documents from his briefcase and spreading them across the glass desk in the study. I'll be here with you. We'll go through it page by page. You'll sign, and then it's done. Over. You can start to move on. Move on, Julian repeated, the words like ash in his mouth. To what, exactly? Richard didn't have an answer for that. Elena was in the study, dusting the bookshelves, books Julian had probably never read. Leather-bound classics bought by the decorator to look impressive. She kept her eyes down, her movements small, her presence erased. This was the skill she'd perfected over 3 years, how to be in a room without taking up space. But she was listening. She couldn't help it. The total settlement is $847 million, Richard said, pointing to a number on the first page. That covers the fraud amount, plus processing fees, interest calculations, and legal costs. Your assets will be liquidated, the penthouse, the cars, the properties in the Hamptons and Aspen. The bankruptcy court will handle the distribution to creditors. You'll walk away with nothing, but you'll walk away free. $847 million. Elena's hand stilled on the bookshelf. That number was wrong. She knew it was wrong. But how could she possibly know that? She was just the maid. She cleaned toilets and mopped floors and took out trash. What did she know about billion-dollar fraud cases? Except she'd been a legal secretary in Guatemala City for 6 years before she'd immigrated. She'd worked on international contracts, cross-border disputes, financial settlements. She'd been good at her job, good enough that her boss had once told her she should go to law school, that she had the mind for it. That was before everything fell apart, before survival became more important than ambition. And she'd read about Julian's case. Not because she cared about billionaires or their problems, but because, on the subway, scanning the news on her phone was better than staring at the existential dread of her own life. The Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, The Times, they'd all covered the Hearth Technologies scandal in excruciating detail. The fraud amount had been $684 million. She remembered the number because it had seemed so impossibly large, so abstract, that she tried to imagine what that much money could actually do. How many lives it could change. How many families like hers it could save. $684 million. Not $847 million. Elena's heart began to pound. She moved to the windows, spraying glass cleaner she didn't need, her mind racing. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe there were additional fees she didn't understand. Maybe the lawyers knew what they were doing. But $163 million was a lot of additional fees. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 2:15 p.m. Richard was still talking, droning on about clauses and liability protections and asset transfers. Julian sat at his desk, staring at the documents like they were written in a language he no longer understood. His pen was in his hand, but he wasn't moving. He looked paralyzed, hollowed out. He looked like a man about to sign his own death warrant. Elena's hands trembled. She set down the spray bottle carefully, quietly, on the windowsill. She told herself to stay quiet, to mind her business. She wasn't a lawyer anymore. She wasn't even a legal secretary. She was a maid, and maids didn't interrupt billionaires and their high-powered attorneys to point out mistakes in contracts they had no business reading. Except, what if she was right? What if that number was wrong, and Julian was about to pay $163 million more than he should, and she said nothing because she was too afraid to speak up? What if the cost of her silence was greater than the cost of her voice? Richard checked his watch. All right, Julian, I'm going to set up the video conference. The other attorneys will join at 2:45 for a final review before you sign at 3. Do you want anything? Water? Coffee? I want this to be over, Julian said quietly. It will be. Soon. 2:28 p.m. Elena watched Richard pull out his laptop, adjusting the camera angle on the desk. Julian sat rigid in his chair, staring at the papers in front of him like they might spontaneously combust if he looked hard enough. She had to say something. But what if she was wrong? What if she embarrassed herself, got fired, lost this job she desperately needed? What if they looked at her like she was crazy, the maid, who thought she understood complex financial law better than teams of attorneys? Elena's mother had once told her, "Mija, the world will try to make you small, but God gave you a mind and a voice for a reason. Don't let fear steal what's yours." She took a breath, then another. 2:33 p.m. Richard's phone rang. He stepped into the hallway to take the call, leaving Julian alone in the study. Alone, except for Elena. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, a drum counting down the seconds. Her mouth was dry, her hands were shaking. Do it. Say something. Now. Mr. Hearth? Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended, barely louder than the hum of the city outside. Julian didn't react, didn't even look up. He was staring at page 7 of the document, the one with the settlement amount in bold, $847 million. Elena tried again, louder this time. Mr. Hearth. Now he looked up, and his eyes passed over her with the blank expression of someone noticing a piece of furniture had spoken. There was no recognition there, no acknowledgement that she was human. It should have made her stop, should have sent her back into silence. Instead, it made her angry. The number, she said, her voice steadier now. On page 7. I think it's wrong. Julian blinked. His expression shifted from blank to confused, to something that might have been annoyance. Excuse me? Elena's heart was in her throat, but she stepped closer to the desk, crossing an invisible line she'd never crossed before. The line between servant and equal. Between invisible and seen. The settlement amount, $847 million. She pointed at the page, with a finger still damp from cleaning solution. I don't think that's right. For a long moment, Julian just stared at her, really looked at her for the first time in 3 years. She watched him struggle to process what was happening, that his maid, the woman whose name he'd never learned, was challenging a document prepared by some of the most expensive lawyers in New York. I'm sorry, he said slowly. But who are you? The question hit her like a slap. 3 years. She'd spent 3 years in this penthouse, in his life, and he didn't even know who she was. "I'm Elena," she said, lifting her chin. "Elena Morales. I've been cleaning your home for 3 years." "Right, Elena." He said her name like he was testing it out for the first time. "I appreciate your concern. But I have teams of lawyers handling this. They know what they're doing." "Do they?" The words came out before she could stop them. Julian's eyebrows shot up. Richard's voice could be heard in the hallway, still on his phone call. The clock on the wall ticked to 2:38 p.m. Elena knew this was her only chance. Once Richard came back, once the video conference started, she'd lose her window. She'd be shuffled aside, dismissed, made invisible again. The original fraud amount was $684 million, she said quickly, her words tumbling over each other. "I read it in the Wall Street Journal. Multiple sources confirmed it. That's what your COO embezzled. But this settlement has you paying $847 million. That's $163 million more. I know there are legal fees and costs, but..." "How do you know this?" Julian interrupted. And now there was something new in his voice. Not annoyance. Interest. Maybe even the faintest hint of hope. "I read," Elena said simply. "And I used to work in legal. Before I came here. Before I was..." She didn't finish the sentence. "Before I was just a maid. Before I was invisible." Julian stood up from his chair slowly, like he was moving through water. He picked up the document, his eyes scanning page 7 with new intensity. "Processing fees," he read aloud. "Interest calculations on the full amount, but these weren't part of the original indictment terms." "No," Elena said. "They weren't. I remember because the news made a big deal about how the $684 million was the exact amount that went missing from the client trust accounts, not a dollar more or less." 2:42 p.m. Richard's footsteps sounded in the hallway. He was coming back. Julian looked at Elena, really looked at her, and she saw something crack in his expression. The wall between them, built from years of class and assumption and invisibility, developed a fracture. "What's your name again?" he asked. "Elena. Elena Morales." "Elena," he repeated, and this time, it sounded like he was actually saying a person's name, not just a label. "How confident are you about this?" She met his eyes. "I'm not a lawyer, I can't be certain. But I'm confident enough to risk my job to tell you." The words hung in the air between them. Richard walked back into the study, his phone tucked away, his professional smile firmly in place. "All right, we're all set. The other parties are logging on now. Julian, if you'll just..." "Wait," Julian said. Richard froze. "What?" "I need to make a phone call." Julian grabbed his phone from the desk, his movements suddenly sharp with purpose. "To my CFO, right now." "Julian, we don't have time for..." "Make time," Julian said, and the steel in his voice was the first sign of the man he used to be. The man who'd built an empire from nothing. "Elena here just raised a question about the settlement amount, and I need it answered before I sign anything." Richard's eyes flicked to Elena, really seeing her for the first time. His expression was a mix of confusion and barely concealed disdain. "The maid?" "The woman," Julian corrected, his voice cold, "who might have just saved me from making a $163 million mistake." The clock struck 2:47 p.m. 13 minutes until the end of Julian's world. Or maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something else entirely. Julian's finger hovered over his phone for a heartbeat before he pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice, and Elena watched his face cycle through emotions she couldn't name: fear, hope, something desperate and raw. "Don't hang up," Julian said the moment the call connected. "I know you don't work for me anymore, David. But I need 30 seconds. A pause. Elena could hear a tinny voice on the other end, sharp with irritation. "The settlement amount," Julian continued, his words rapid fire. $847 million. Walk me through how we got there. From the original fraud amount." Richard's face had gone from annoyed to alarmed. "Julian, this is highly inappropriate. We have a scheduled..." Julian held up a hand, silencing him. His eyes never left the document on his desk. More tinny voices from the phone. Julian's expression shifted: confusion first, then something harder, sharper. "Say that again," he said slowly. "The base amount was what?" Elena's hands were clenched at her sides. She'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. If she was wrong about this, if she'd just humiliated herself and destroyed what little stability she had in her life, there was no going back. But if she was right, 684 million, Julian repeated, his voice gaining strength. So, where does the additional $163 million come from? Richard moved closer to the desk, his professional composure cracking. Julian, the processing fees were disclosed were they? Julian's eyes were locked on page 7 now, scanning with an intensity Elena recognized. It was the same way she used to read contracts in Guatemala City, looking for the trap hidden in the language. Because David here is telling me that the original settlement offer 2 weeks ago was for the base amount plus standard legal fees, which would put us at roughly $710 million. So where did we gain $137 million in fees in 2 weeks? The silence that followed was electric. Richard's face had gone pale. There must be. Let me review my notes. The other party's counsel may have included additional. Get them on the line, Julian said. Now, before we sign anything. We have 7 minutes until the scheduled signing, Richard said, his voice tight. Then I suggest you work fast. Richard's jaw clenched. He pulled out his phone and stepped away, his voice low and urgent as he made a call. Julian set his phone down on the desk and looked at Elena. Really looked at her. Not through her, not past her. At her. You said you used to work in legal? His voice was quieter now, almost gentle. Elena nodded. In Guatemala City. I was a legal secretary for 6 years. International contracts, mostly. Corporate law. And now you're cleaning houses, she finished for him. Yes. The question was obvious in his eyes, why? But he didn't ask it. Maybe because they both knew there were 1,000 reasons why someone's life could take a turn like that, and most of them involved sacrifice and survival and the kind of pain you didn't discuss with strangers. Even if those strangers had just possibly saved your life. I never asked your name, Julian said suddenly. In 3 years. I never once asked your name. Elena didn't know what to say to that. It was true, and the truth didn't need decoration. That's, he paused, searching for the right word, that's inexcusable. I'm sorry. An apology. From a billionaire to his maid. Elena felt something shift inside her chest. Not quite forgiveness, but maybe the space where forgiveness could grow. You've had a lot on your mind, she said carefully. That's not an excuse. He ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time she saw him not as her employer, but as just a man tired, broken, trying to hold himself together with nothing but force of will. I built an empire by paying attention to details, but I stopped paying attention to people. I stopped seeing them as human, as real. Before Elena could respond, Richard turned back toward them, his face a careful mask of professional neutrality that didn't quite hide the tension in his jaw. I've got Marcus Levine on the line, Richard said. Senior partner at the firm representing the prosecution's office. He wants to discuss the fee structure. Put him on speaker, Julian said. Richard hesitated. Julian, this is delicate. Having a third party present during Elena stays, Julian said firmly. She's the one who caught this. She deserves to hear the answer. Richard's eyes flicked to Elena again, and this time she saw something else there. Not just disdain, fear. He was afraid she was right. He tapped his phone and a voice filled the room, smooth, practiced. The kind of voice that had talked people into bad decisions for 3 decades. Julian, good to hear from you, Marcus Levine said. Richard tells me you have some concerns about the settlement structure. I have questions about $163 million in fees that weren't in the original proposal, Julian said, his voice steady. A pause on the other end. Well, as you know, complex settlements like this involve numerous parties. The state's attorney, the federal prosecutors, the defrauded clients, the bankruptcy trustees. Each layer requires coordination fees, processing costs, administrative overhead. That's not an answer, Julian interrupted. That's a word salad. Give me numbers. Itemized. Another pause, longer this time. I don't have those in front of me right now, Marcus said smoothly. But I can assure you that every fee is standard and necessary. Then the signing is postponed until you can provide them, Julian said. Julian, Marcus's voice hardened. We have an agreement. We have a timeline. If you don't sign this settlement today, The offer comes off the table. The prosecution moves forward with the criminal case. You're looking at trial. At prison time. Elena watched Julian's hands curl into fists on the desk. This was the trap, she realized. The pressure. Sign now or lose everything. Don't ask questions. Don't push back. Just surrender. How long to get me those itemized fees? Julian asked. That could take days, weeks even. Then take them. Because I'm not signing something I don't understand. Not anymore. Julian, listen to me, Richard started, but Julian cut him off with a look. The clock read 2:56 p.m. 4 minutes until the scheduled signing. Marcus, Julian said slowly, I'm going to ask you a direct question. And I want a direct answer. Is there any part of this settlement that inflates fees beyond what's standard and necessary? The silence on the other end was deafening. I'll need to consult with my team, Marcus finally said. That's what I thought. Julian's voice was ice. The signing is postponed. You have 48 hours to provide a complete breakdown of every fee, every charge, every dollar above the base fraud amount. If it's all legitimate, I'll sign. If it's not, you'll what? Marcus challenged. Fight this? You don't have the resources, Julian. Your accounts are frozen. Your assets are being liquidated. You're broke. Maybe, Julian said. But I'm not stupid. And I'm not signing something that might be designed to rob me blind on my way out the door. He ended the call. The penthouse fell into silence. Richard stood frozen, his phone still in his hand, looking like a man who just watched his commission evaporate. Do you have any idea what you just did? Yeah, Julian said. I stood up for myself, for the first time in months. You stood up for Richard's professional mask finally shattered. You just walked away from your only way out. They're going to take you to trial now. They're going to destroy you. Maybe, Julian said again. But if Elena's right, and I think she is, then they were already destroying me. Just more quietly. Richard looked at Elena, and the hatred in his eyes was naked now. This is your fault. You had no business interfering. She had every business. Julian interrupted, his voice sharp. She saw something that needed to be seen. That's more than I can say for the lawyers. I've been paying $800 an hour. Richard grabbed his briefcase from the chair, his movements jerky with rage. I'm done. You're on your own. I've been on my own this whole time, Julian said quietly. I just didn't realize it. Richard stormed out, and the slam of the penthouse door echoed through the empty space. 3 p.m. The moment of the signing came and went. Julian and Elena stood in the study, two people from completely different worlds, bound together by a decision that might save one of them or destroy them both. What do we do now? Elena asked quietly. Julian looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in months, something that might have been hope flickered in his eyes. We find out the truth, he said. Together. The silence after Richard left felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane, deceptively calm, with chaos swirling just beyond reach. Julian stood at his desk, both hands pressed flat against the glass surface, his head bowed. Elena couldn't tell if he was praying or just trying to remember how to breathe. She should probably leave. Her shift was technically over at 3 p.m., and she needed to get home, grab a few hours of sleep before her night shift at the hospital started at 11. But her feet wouldn't move. You should sit down, she said finally. Julian laughed a short, bitter sound. In my own home? Should I ask permission? I mean, because you look like you're about to fall over. He glanced at her, surprised, and then actually smiled. It was small and sad, but real. You're probably right. He sank into his desk chair, suddenly looking every one of his 42 years. God, what did I just do? You asked for the truth, Elena said. The truth might send me to prison. Or, it might set you free. Julian looked at her with something like wonder. You sound like a lawyer. I almost was one. Once. Elena surprised herself by moving closer, sitting in the chair across from his desk, the one where clients and executives probably used to sit. It felt presumptuous, but Julian didn't object. In Guatemala, I was saving money for law school. I took night classes. I was 2 semesters away from my degree. What happened? Life, Elena said simply. My mother got sick. My daughter needed better schools. The neighborhood where we lived. It wasn't safe anymore. Someone had to make a choice, and I was the one who could. So I came here. Alone? Alone, she confirmed. I send money back every month. My mother watches Maria, my daughter. She's 12 now. Smart, so smart, Elena's voice caught slightly. She wants to be a doctor. Julian was quiet for a moment. You gave up your dream so she could chase hers. That's what parents do. Not all of them. There was something dark in his voice, some old wound Elena didn't have the right to probe. My father was a janitor, worked nights at Columbia University. That's how I got interested in tech. I'd sneak into the computer labs while he cleaned, teach myself to code. But when I got my first big contract, when the money started coming in, you know what he said to me? Elena shook her head. He said, "Don't forget where you came from, Jules. Money changes people, makes them blind." Julian's laugh was hollow. I forgot anyway. I got so blind I couldn't even see the woman cleaning my house for 3 years. Couldn't see the fraud happening in my own company. Couldn't see my wife leaving until her bags were already packed. You were building something, Elena offered. Sometimes when we're focused on building, we stop seeing what's already there. That's generous. More generous than I deserve. Before Elena could respond, Julian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression darkened. It's David, my former CFO. He answered, putting it on speaker, without asking if Elena minded a small thing, but it felt significant, an acknowledgement that she was part of this now. Julian, what the hell did you just do? David's voice was tight with panic. Marcus Levine called me, said you walked away from the settlement, said you're demanding an audit of the fees. Are you insane? Maybe, Julian said. Or maybe I'm finally sane. David, I need you to be honest with me. When we agreed to this settlement 2 weeks ago, what was the amount we discussed? A pause. $684 million, plus standard legal fees and administrative costs. We estimated around $710 to $720 million total. So, where did $847 million come from? Another pause, longer this time. I don't know. Richard said the other parties had added necessary processing fees. He said it was standard for cases this complex. Did you verify that? Julian, I'm not a lawyer. I trusted Richard. He's supposed to be one of the best. Yeah, well, my maid just caught something that the best lawyer in New York either missed or deliberately hid. Elena felt her cheeks burn at the word maid, but Julian glanced at her with something that looked like apology and respect mixed together. Wait, your maid? David sounded confused. Her name is Elena, Julian said firmly. And she used to work in legal before she immigrated. She's the one who noticed the discrepancy. Jesus. David exhaled, slowly. Okay. Let me make some calls. I still have contacts at the AG's office. If there's something wrong with this settlement, if someone's been padding the fees, that's fraud on top of fraud, Julian finished. Yeah, I know. This could get ugly, Julian. Really ugly. But if you're right, David's voice shifted, gaining an edge of excitement. If you're right, this changes everything. The whole case could be reopened. You might actually have a defense, or I might have just painted an even bigger target on my back. Either way, you're going to need help. Real help. Not Richard's firm. They're clearly compromised. You need someone independent. With what money? Julian asked bitterly. My accounts are frozen. David, I can't pay for a cup of coffee right now, let alone a legal team. Let me work on it. Give me 24 hours. I'll call in some favors. The call ended. Julian set his phone down and stared at it like it might explode. 24 hours, he said quietly. In 24 hours, either I get answers or the walls close in completely. Elena checked her own phone, 3:47 p.m. She was supposed to be on the subway by now, heading home to sleep before her night shift. But something kept her rooted in place. Maybe it was the way Julian looked, not like a billionaire anymore, just like a man drowning who'd grabbed onto a piece of driftwood. Maybe it was the realization that she'd just upended both their lives with a single observation. Or maybe it was something else entirely, something she didn't want to name yet. Are you hungry? She asked suddenly. Julian blinked. What? Hungry? When's the last time you ate? He thought about it. I don't remember. Yesterday? The day before? Elena stood up, decision made. Your kitchen is empty except for old Chinese food and vodka. That's not a meal plan, that's a suicide attempt. Come on, where? There's a bodega on 82nd Street. I'm going to buy you real food, and you're going to eat it. And then we're going to figure out what happens next. Julian stared at her like she'd just spoken in a foreign language. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, Elena interrupted. But I'm going to anyway. Because someone needs to make sure you don't collapse before we find out if I'm right. And also, she paused, surprising herself with her own honesty, because I just blew up my afternoon, and I'm not letting that be for nothing. A ghost of a real smile crossed Julian's face. You're bossy. I'm practical. There's a difference. I don't have cash on me, he admitted, and the shame in his voice was palpable. My accounts are frozen. My cards don't work. I literally cannot buy a sandwich right now. I have $20, Elena said. It'll be enough. The look Julian gave her then was complicated gratitude mixed with humiliation, mixed with something that might have been the beginning of respect. I'll pay you back. If you end up not going to prison, yes, you will, Elena said. With interest. Now, come on, put on a coat. It's cold out. They walked to the bodega together, and it was possibly the strangest experience of Elena's life. Julian Harth, tech billionaire, former CEO, the man whose face had been on the cover of Forbes, walked beside her down Madison Avenue in a designer coat that probably cost more than her annual rent, while she led him to a tiny corner store, where the owner, Mr. Patel, greeted her in Spanish. Elena, you're late today. Everything okay? Everything's fine, Mr. Patel. Just a long day. Mr. Patel's eyes slid to Julian with open curiosity. But he didn't ask. That was one of the things Elena loved about this neighborhood. Everyone knew everyone's business, but they also knew when to mind their own. She bought sandwiches, turkey, and Swiss on wheat for both of them, plus 2 bottles of water and an apple. Mr. Patel threw in a bag of chips for free, winking at her. You look like you need it, Mija. The total came to $18.47. Elena counted out her bills carefully, aware of Julian watching her hands, aware of how little she had. Aware of the vast gulf between them, between a woman who counted out singles and quarters, and a man who'd once bought companies with a phone call. They walked back to the penthouse in silence. The security guard nodded at Elena. He knew her. She'd been coming here for 3 years, but his eyebrows rose when he saw her walking with Julian like they were. What? Friends? Equals? Neither was quite right, but something had shifted between them. In the penthouse, Elena set the food out on the kitchen island. The marble countertops were probably worth more than her entire apartment building, but hunger didn't care about luxury. Julian unwrapped his sandwich and took a bite, and something in his face crumpled. This is the best thing I've eaten in weeks, he said. It's bodega turkey. Exactly. He took another bite, then another, eating like a man who'd forgotten what food tasted like. God, when did I become the kind of person who can't even feed himself? You've been under stress, Elena said, biting into her own sandwich. Extreme stress breaks people, makes them forget basic things. That's generous again. I'm not being generous. I'm being honest. You think I don't understand what it feels like to forget to take care of yourself? I work 16-hour days sometimes. I skip meals. I drink gas station coffee for dinner. We're all just trying to survive. Julian looked at her, really looked at her, and Elena felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with judgment. You work another job, he said. It wasn't a question. Night shift at Mount Sinai. Hospital custodian. I go there after I leave here. Elena. Her name in his mouth sounded different now. Real. That's insane. When do you sleep? She shrugged. When I can. A few hours here and there. You do what you have to do. For your daughter. For my daughter, she confirmed. For my mother. For the chance that maybe Maria gets to have a different life than I did. A better one. They ate in silence for a while. The afternoon light was fading outside, Manhattan's skyline beginning to glow with artificial light. In 12 hours, the city would wake up again, and this strange suspended moment would be over. David would call with answers or excuses. The prosecutors would make their move. Julian's fragile house of cards would either stabilize or collapse completely. And Elena would still be here, somehow caught in the middle of it all. Can I ask you something? Julian said quietly. Sure. Why did you speak up? You could have just let it go. Let me sign the papers. Kept your head down. Why risk your job for someone like me? Elena set down her sandwich and thought about the question. Really thought about it. Because, she said finally, I've spent 3 years being invisible, being the person nobody sees or hears or remembers. And maybe part of that was survival, staying small keeps you safe. But part of it was, I don't know, shame. I used to be someone different, someone who had a career and ambitions and a voice. And somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that I'd lost the right to that voice. That because I clean houses now, I don't get to have opinions about contracts or law or anything important. She met his eyes. But then I saw that number, and I knew it was wrong. And I realized that if I stayed silent, if I let you sign something that might be fraud because I was too afraid to speak up, then I really would be invisible, not just to you, but to myself. Julian was quiet for a long moment. You saved me today, he said softly. You know that, right? Even if this all falls apart, even if I end up in prison anyway, you saw me when I couldn't see myself. You gave me the chance to fight back. That's not nothing. It's not nothing, Elena agreed. But it's not everything yet, either. We still have to prove I'm right. We, Julian repeated, a small smile tugging at his lips. I like that word. Elena's phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. Confirm you're coming in at 11 p.m.? We're short-staffed tonight. Reality crashed back in. She had to leave soon. Had to sleep for a few hours. Then drag herself to another shift, another job, another night of exhaustion. The sandwich sat heavy in her stomach. She wasn't used to eating this much in the middle of the day. I need to go, she said reluctantly. Your other job. Yeah. Julian stood up, and there was something different in his posture now. Less defeated, more determined. Elena, I can't pay you right now. But when this is over, if we win this, I'm going to make sure you never have to work 2 jobs again. That's a promise. Don't make promises you might not be able to keep, Elena said. But her heart stuttered at the words anyway. I'm good at keeping my promises, Julian said. It's just been a while since I made any that mattered. Elena gathered her cleaning supplies, a surreal return to normalcy after everything that had happened. At the door, she paused. What are you going to do tonight? She asked. Research, Julian said. If I'm going to fight this, I need to understand every detail of what I'm fighting. I need to become an expert on my own case. Good, Elena said. Be smart. Be careful. And Julian? Yeah? Thank you for listening to me. For seeing me. Thank you for speaking, he said quietly. For being brave enough to be seen. Elena left the penthouse with her heart feeling strange and full and terrified all at once. In the elevator, she caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. She looked the same as she had this morning, but something fundamental had changed. She'd been invisible for so long. But today, for the first time in 3 years, someone had actually looked at her. And she'd looked back. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is speak up when we're terrified of the consequences. Have you ever had a moment where you had to choose between safety and truth? What did you choose? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear about your moment of courage. Elena's night shift at Mount Sinai Hospital was usually a blur of bleach fumes and exhaustion. But tonight her mind kept drifting back to the penthouse, to Julian's face when she'd spoken up, to the way everything had changed in the span of 13 minutes. She pushed her mop down the empty corridor of the 3rd floor, her body moving on autopilot while her thoughts spun in circles. What had she done? She'd inserted herself into a billionaire's legal disaster. She'd challenged lawyers who probably made more in an hour than she made in a year. She'd risked her job, both jobs, for a man who hadn't even known her name yesterday. But he knows it now, a small voice whispered in her mind. Her phone buzzed in her pocket around 2 a.m. She pulled it out, expecting a text from the hospital supervisor. Instead, it was a number she didn't recognize. Elena, it's Julian. Got your number from the building management. I hope that's okay. Can't sleep. Keep thinking about what you said. About the numbers. David is making calls. Might have something tomorrow. Anyway, thank you. For everything. J.H. Elena stared at the text for a long moment. Billionaires didn't text their maids at 2 a.m. Employers didn't thank their employees for saving them from fraud. This wasn't normal. None of this was normal. She typed back, "It's okay. Try to sleep. You'll need your strength for whatever comes next." The response came immediately. Are you at work right now? Your other job? Yes. Third floor, pediatric wing. Jesus, Elena, when do you sleep? When I can, it's fine. I'm used to it. A longer pause this time. Then, it's not fine. But I understand. My dad used to work nights. I remember waiting up for him. Watching him come home exhausted, smelling like industrial cleaner and too strong coffee. He'd collapse on the couch and be asleep in seconds. I thought he was the strongest person in the world. Elena felt something twist in her chest. What happened to him? He died when I was 23. Heart attack. Right there in the Columbia Science Building, middle of his shift. The doctors said it was years of stress and no rest. He worked himself to death so I could have a better life. I'm sorry. Me too. Every day. Because I never told him I appreciated it. I was too busy building my company, chasing success. Too busy to visit, too busy to call. And then, he was gone. Elena leaned against the wall, her mop forgotten. Her fingers trembled as she typed. He knew. Parents always know. I hope so. Elena, can I ask you something personal? Depends on the question. Your daughter, Maria. When's the last time you saw her? The question hit her like a physical blow. Elena closed her eyes, and suddenly she was back in Guatemala City, 3 years ago, holding 12-year-old Maria 9, then at the airport. Maria crying, begging her not to go. Elena crying too, but trying to be strong, trying to smile. I'm coming back, mi amor. I promise, just for a little while. To make money for school, for abuela's medicine. I'll be back before you know it. But it had been 3 years. 3 years of FaceTime calls and missed birthdays and watching her daughter grow up through a phone screen. 3 years, Elena typed. I haven't seen her in 3 years. That's not right. It's survival. It's what I have to do. But at what cost? Elena didn't have an answer for that. She put her phone away and went back to mopping. But tears blurred her vision and she had to stop, pressing her palms against her eyes, trying to hold herself together. At what cost? Everything. It cost her everything. The next morning, Elena dragged herself back to the penthouse on 3 hours of sleep. She felt hollowed out, running on fumes and gas station coffee. When she let herself in at 6 a.m., she expected to find Julian asleep, or at least resting. Instead, he was at his desk, surrounded by papers, his laptop open, eyes bloodshot and wild. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. Julian, Elena set down her cleaning supplies. Did you sleep? Couldn't, he said, his voice hoarse. Elena, I've been going through everything. Every document, every email, every communication from the last 6 months. And I found something. He gestured her over urgently. Elena hesitated, crossing that line again, moving from employee to whatever she was now, but his intensity pulled her forward. Look at this. Julian pointed to an email on his screen, dated 4 months ago. This is from Richard's firm to the prosecutor's office. It's proposing settlement terms. The amount listed here is $684 million plus standard fees, exactly what David said. But look at this one. He pulled up another email, dated 3 weeks ago. This is from Marcus Levine's firm to Richard's firm. They've revised the settlement structure, adding these processing fees and coordination costs. And Richard never told me. He never showed me this email chain. Why would he hide it? Elena asked, leaning closer to read the screen. That's what I've been trying to figure out. Julian rubbed his face, exhaustion and anger warring in his expression. At first I thought maybe he missed it, but the more I dig, the more it looks. He pulled out a printed document, a partnership agreement between law firms. Elena scanned it quickly, her legal training kicking in despite the years away. This is a referral fee agreement, she said slowly, between Richard's firm and Marcus Levine's firm. If they secure a settlement over $800 million, Richard's firm gets a percentage of the fees. 10%, Julian said grimly. Of $163 million in inflated fees, that's $16.3 million going to Richard's firm. For doing nothing except letting the other side overcharge me. Elena felt sick. That's fraud, Julian finished. Legal malpractice at minimum. Conspiracy to defraud at maximum. Richard wasn't representing me. He was working with them. Against me. The implications crashed over both of them like a wave. Richard, the lawyer Julian had trusted, paid millions of dollars over the years, had sold him out. had conspired with the prosecution's lawyers to inflate the settlement, enriching everyone except his actual client. "We need to take this to someone," Elena said. "A judge. The Bar Association. Someone." "I called David an hour ago," Julian said. "He's already on it. He's got a contact at the New York State Bar who handles ethics complaints. And he found us a lawyer, someone independent, who owes him a favor. She's coming here at 10 a.m. Elena checked the time. 7:15 a.m., 3 hours. "You need to shower," she said, "and eat. You can't meet with a lawyer looking like you just crawled out of a grave." Julian laughed, a real laugh this time, startled and genuine. "You're very bossy for someone who's technically my employee." "I'm technically trying to keep you alive long enough to not go to prison," Elena shot back. "Now go, shower. I'll make coffee and see what I can scavenge for breakfast." He stood up, swaying slightly from exhaustion, and paused beside her. "Elena, I don't know how to thank you for this. For all of this. Thank me when it's over," she said, "when you're actually free." "No," Julian said quietly. "I need to say it now. While I'm clear-headed enough to mean it. You didn't have to do any of this. You could have walked away, but you didn't. You stayed. You helped. You saw what everyone else missed, including me. That's not nothing. That's everything." Elena felt her throat tighten. "I just pointed out a number. You did a lot more than that." His eyes were serious, intense. "You reminded me that there are still people in the world who give a damn about truth, about what's right. I'd forgotten that. I'd been living in a world where everything was transactional, where everyone had an angle, where trust was just another commodity to be bought and sold. But you didn't have an angle. You just cared." "I cared because it was wrong," Elena said. "Because someone had to." "Most people wouldn't have," Julian said. "Most people would have stayed quiet, stayed safe." They stood there for a moment, the morning light streaming through the windows. Two people from completely different worlds who'd somehow found themselves on the same side of an impossible fight. "Go shower," Elena said again, softer this time. "I'll be here." While Julian was in the bathroom, Elena explored his nearly empty kitchen and managed to cobble together something resembling breakfast eggs from the back of the fridge that were just barely still good, toast from bread she found in the freezer, coffee strong enough to wake the dead. She was setting plates on the island when her phone rang. Maria's face filled the screen, a scheduled call. Elena's heart sank. She'd almost forgotten. "Mommy!" Maria's voice was bright, happy. Behind her, Elena could see her mother's kitchen in Guatemala, the familiar yellow walls, the sound of morning birds. "You look tired." "I am tired, mi amor, but I'm happy to see your face." Elena sat down, her whole body aching. "How's school?" "Good. I got an A on my math test. Abuela says I'm the smartest girl in the family." Maria beamed with pride, then her expression shifted. "When are you coming home, Mommy? It's been so long." Elena's chest constricted. "I know, baby. I know. Soon. You always say soon." "I mean it this time. You always say that too." The words weren't accusatory, just sad. The resignation in her 12-year-old daughter's voice broke something in Elena. "Maria, listen to me." Elena's voice caught. "I love you. Everything I do, every single day I'm here, it's for you, so you can stay in that good school, so Abuela can get her medicine, so you can become the doctor you want to be. I know it's hard. I know you miss me. I miss you too, more than anything in the world." "Then come home," Maria said simply. Elena didn't know what to say to that. How do you explain to a child that love sometimes looks like leaving, that sacrifice means being apart? "I'll try," she said finally. "I promise, I'll try." After the call ended, Elena sat with her phone in her hands, staring at Maria's smiling face on the screen. 3 years. 3 years of trying to build a better life, and all she'd built was distance. "That was your daughter?" Elena looked up. Julian stood in the doorway, showered and dressed in fresh clothes, his hair still damp. He looked more human now, less like a ghost haunting his own life. "Yes," Elena said. "Maria. She looks like you." Julian moved to the island, sitting across from her. Same eyes. "She's the best thing I ever did," Elena said quietly. "The only thing that matters." Julian was quiet for a moment, pushing eggs around his plate. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" Elena nodded. "I wanted kids," he said. My ex-wife and I tried for years. Treatments, specialists, the whole thing. Nothing worked. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I became obsessed with success instead. Building the company, making more money, proving something to, I don't know who, myself? My dead father? The universe? He set down his fork. I told myself it was okay that we couldn't have children because I was building something bigger, a legacy, an empire. But empires are cold, Elena. They don't hug you. They don't tell you they love you. They don't FaceTime you from Guatemala with drawings that say Mama on them. No, Elena agreed softly. They don't. You gave up everything to give your daughter a chance, Julian said. That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. It doesn't feel strong. It feels like I'm failing her every day. You're not, Julian said firmly. You're here. You're working 2 jobs. You're sending money home. You're sacrificing your own happiness for hers. That's what love looks like. That's what my father did for me. And maybe I didn't understand it when I was young, but I understand it now. The doorbell chimed, the internal system that announced visitors. Julian checked the security screen. A woman in her 50s, carrying a briefcase, professional and sharp-eyed. That's her, Julian said. The lawyer David sent. Are you ready? Elena stood up, smoothing her jeans, suddenly aware of how out of place she looked. I'm not sure I should be here for this. This is your legal meeting. Elena, Julian caught her arm gently. You're the one who caught this. You're the reason we have a case at all. You absolutely should be here. But I'm not a lawyer. Not anymore. I'm just... You're Elena Morales, Julian interrupted. And that's exactly who I need beside me. He held her gaze, and in his eyes Elena saw something she hadn't expected. Trust. Real trust. Not the kind you gave to an employee, but the kind you gave to a partner. An equal. Someone who mattered. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. Julian pressed the button to allow the lawyer access, and, as the elevator rose toward the penthouse, Elena felt the weight of what was coming. This wasn't just about catching fraud anymore. This was about tearing down the system that had tried to destroy Julian. This was about fighting back against people who thought they could get away with anything because they had power and money and the right connections. This was about 2 people who'd been invisible in different ways, one overlooked, one betrayed, finally being seen. The elevator doors opened. The fight was about to begin. The lawyer who stepped into Julian's penthouse was not what Elena expected. She was older, mid-50s, maybe with steel-gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and the kind of presence that filled a room without effort. She wore a simple black suit and carried a leather briefcase that looked like it had seen 1,000 courtrooms. Julian Harth, she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. I'm Margaret Chen. David called me at 6 a.m. this morning sounding like his hair was on fire. Said you've got a legal malpractice case that might blow up half of Manhattan's corporate law scene. That might be underselling it, Julian said with a tired smile. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Margaret's eyes shifted to Elena, assessing. And you are? Elena Morales, Elena said, fighting the urge to add the maid at the end. I'm the one who caught the discrepancy in the settlement. Margaret's eyebrows rose. You're the one who spotted $163 million in fraudulent fees? David was vague on the details. I used to work in legal, Elena said. In Guatemala. I just noticed the number didn't match what I'd read in the news. Just noticed, Margaret repeated, a small smile tugging at her lips. Miss Morales, in my 30 years of practice, I've seen Harvard-educated lawyers miss things that paralegals caught. Intelligence isn't about degrees, it's about paying attention. You clearly pay attention. Elena felt something warm bloom in her chest. Validation. Respect. From someone who didn't know her history or her job title, just her action. Margaret set her briefcase on Julian's desk and pulled out a laptop. All right, let's see what we're dealing with. Julian, walk me through everything. Start from the beginning. For the next hour, Julian and Elena told the story. The fraud scheme, Trevor's betrayal, the settlement negotiations, Richard's role, the inflated fees, the email chain Julian had discovered in the middle of the night. Margaret listened intently. occasionally stopping them to ask pointed questions, her fingers flying across her keyboard as she took notes. When they finished, Margaret sat back and removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "This is worse than I thought," she said. "Worse how?" Julian asked, his voice tight. "Richard Morrison didn't just commit malpractice, he's part of an organized scheme. This referral fee agreement you found? That's just the surface. If I'm reading this right, there are probably other lawyers involved, other cases where they've done the same thing. Inflated settlements, split the extra fees. The clients never know because they're too desperate or too broken to check the math." Elena felt sick. "How many people have they done this to?" "That's what we need to find out," Margaret said. "But first, we need to protect Julian. Because when we blow the whistle on this, Richard and Marcus are going to come at us with everything they have. They'll claim the fees were legitimate. They'll try to discredit our evidence. And they'll absolutely try to destroy Julian's credibility, paint him as a desperate fraud trying to weasel out of his obligations." "So what do we do?" Julian asked. Margaret smiled, and it was sharp as a blade. "We get them before they get us. I need copies of everything, every email, every document, every communication you've had with Richard's firm. I'm filing a formal ethics complaint with the State Bar today. And I'm reaching out to the Attorney General's office. If they're smart, they'll want to cut a deal, drop the criminal case against you, in exchange for testimony against the real fraudsters." "Will it work?" Elena asked. "Depends on how much they care about justice versus saving face," Margaret said. "But the evidence is strong. And Julian, you've got something even better than evidence." "What's that?" "You've got her." Margaret nodded toward Elena. "An independent witness with no skin in the game who caught the fraud. That's gold in a courtroom. Juries love people who speak up when they have nothing to gain and everything to lose." Elena felt Julian's eyes on her, warm and grateful. "There's one more thing," Margaret said, her tone shifting. "This is going to get messy, really messy. The press will catch wind of it. Richard's firm will hire crisis PR. They'll dig into both your backgrounds looking for ammunition. Julian, they'll rehash every business decision you've ever made. And Elena, they'll dig into my immigration status," Elena finished quietly. "Try to discredit me because I'm undocumented." The word hung in the air like a grenade. Julian's head snapped up. "What?" Elena met his eyes, her chin lifted. "I'm here on an expired visa. I overstayed. I'm undocumented. If they report me, I could be deported." The silence was deafening. "Why didn't you tell me?" Julian asked, his voice strained. "Because it wasn't relevant until now," Elena said. "And because I've spent 3 years staying invisible specifically so people wouldn't look too closely. But if we're really doing this, if we're going to fight these people, then you need to know the truth. I'm a risk, a liability. And if Richard's team finds out, they'll absolutely use it against us." Margaret was watching them both carefully. "Miss Morales, I need to be clear. If you testify, if you go public with this, your immigration status could become an issue. I can't protect you from that." "I know," Elena said. Her heart was pounding, but her voice was steady. "But I'm tired of being invisible because I'm scared. I'm tired of watching powerful people get away with things because people like me are too afraid to speak up." "Elena, you could lose everything," Julian said. "Your job, your home. They could send you back to Guatemala." "I know," Elena repeated. "But if I stay silent now, I lose something worse. I lose the right to look my daughter in the eye and tell her to be brave. How can I teach her to stand up for what's right if I won't do it myself?" Margaret smiled, a real smile this time, full of respect. "Miss Morales, you would have made one hell of a lawyer." "I still might," Elena said, surprising herself. "Someday, I'll hold you to that," Margaret said. She closed her laptop and stood. "All right, here's the plan. I'm filing the ethics complaint today. I'll reach out to the AG's office through back channels. I've got connections there. Give me 72 hours to lay the groundwork. Julian, you don't sign anything. Don't talk to Richard or Marcus or anyone from their firms. If they contact you, refer them to me. Elena, you keep your head down and your phone on. We might need you to give a formal statement." "What about the press?" Julian asked. "Let them speculate. We'll control the narrative when we're ready." Margaret packed up her briefcase. One more thing. Julian, I'm doing this case pro bono until your assets are unfrozen. David saved my daughter's life once, medical emergency. Long story, so I owe him. But Elena, I want you to know that if this goes to trial, you'll be compensated as an expert witness. Your testimony will be crucial. I don't want money, Elena said. I just want the truth to come out. The truth and money aren't mutually exclusive, Margaret said gently. You've earned both. After Margaret left, the penthouse felt suddenly too quiet. Julian stood at the window, staring out at the city, his shoulders tense. You're undocumented, he said finally. Yes. For how long? 2 years. My visa expired 2 years ago. I applied for an extension, but it was denied. I should have left, but… Elena trailed off. I couldn't. Maria needed surgery. My mother needed medicine. If I left, I'd never be able to come back, and I couldn't abandon them. Julian turned to face her. So you stayed, and risked everything. Yes, and now you're risking it again. For me. For what's right, Elena corrected. There's a difference. Julian crossed the space between them, and suddenly he was close. Close enough that Elena could see the exhaustion lines around his eyes, the gray stubble on his jaw, the way his hands trembled slightly at his sides. I don't deserve this, he said quietly. I don't deserve you risking your life, your freedom, for someone who didn't even know your name a week ago. Maybe not, Elena agreed. But that's not how this works. We don't only help people who deserve it, we help people who need it. And you need help. So do you, Julian said. You're working yourself to death for a daughter you haven't seen in 3 years. You're living on 3 hours of sleep and gas station coffee. You're 1 ICE raid away from losing everything you've built. You need help too, Elena. I'm fine, she said automatically. No, you're not. His voice was gentle but firm. And neither am I. We're both drowning. We've just been drowning alone, but maybe. He paused, searching for words. Maybe we don't have to anymore. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying that when this is over, when we win this thing, I'm going to help you. Really help you. Immigration lawyers, visa applications, whatever it takes. You're not going to be deported. You're not going to lose your daughter. I promise you that. You can't promise that, Elena whispered. You don't have that kind of power. I will, Julian said. When my accounts are unfrozen, when I have my company back, when I rebuild, I'll have that power, and I'll use it for you. Because that's what you do for people who save your life. I just pointed out a number, Elena said again, but the protest was weak. You gave me back my fight, Julian said. You reminded me who I used to be, who I want to be again. That's worth more than any empire. They stood there in the morning light, 2 broken people holding each other up, and for the first time in 3 years, Elena didn't feel invisible. She felt seen, valued, real. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For seeing me. Julian's smile was sad and sweet and genuine. Thank you for letting me. Elena's phone buzzed a text from the hospital. They needed her to cover another shift tonight. Her body ached at the thought, exhaustion pulling at every muscle, but she was about to type yes when Julian's hand covered hers. Don't, he said. I have to work. Not today, Julian interrupted. Today, you rest. Here, sleep in one of the guest rooms. Eat real food. Let someone take care of you for once. Julian, I can't just. Yes, you can, he said firmly. And you will. Because in 72 hours, when Margaret makes her move, we're going to need you sharp and rested and ready to fight. So please, rest. That's not a request from your employer. That's a request from your friend. Friend, the word settled between them, warm and strange and right. Okay, Elena said finally. But just for today. Just for today, Julian agreed. But they both knew it was more than that. Something had shifted between them, some fundamental reordering of the universe. They weren't employer and employee anymore. They weren't billionaire and maid. They were just Julian and Elena, 2 people fighting the same fight, together. Elena woke up in a bed that wasn't hers, in a room filled with afternoon light, and for a disorienting moment couldn't remember where she was. Then it came back: Julian's penthouse, the guest room. He'd insisted she rest, and her body had betrayed her exhaustion, pulling her under into sleep so deep she'd dreamed of nothing at all. She checked her phone, 4:47 p.m., She'd slept for almost 6 hours. 6 uninterrupted hours, in a bed that felt like sleeping on clouds, in a room that was bigger than her entire Bronx apartment. Elena sat up, her muscles protesting. Through the doorway, she could hear voices, Julian's, and someone else's. A woman's voice, sharp and angry. She shouldn't eavesdrop, should probably announce herself, make it clear she wasn't trying to spy. But something in the tone made her freeze, made her listen. Completely insane, Julian. Do you understand what you've done? I understand perfectly, Victoria. I refuse to be robbed. Victoria. Elena's mind clicked. Julian's ex-wife. She'd seen photos in the desk drawer, turned face down but not thrown away. Robbed? Victoria's laugh was bitter. You're calling it robbery when they're offering you a way out? When they're giving you a chance to avoid prison? They were overcharging me by $163 million. And who told you that? Your maid? The contempt in Victoria's voice was acidic. Jesus Christ, Julian, you're taking legal advice from the woman who cleans your toilets. Elena felt the words like a slap. Her name is Elena, Julian said, his voice cold. And she caught something that teams of expensive lawyers missed or deliberately hid. She's undocumented, Julian. I did some digging. Elena Morales, expired visa, working illegally, probably sending money to family back in Guatemala. She's using you, don't you see that? She discovers this supposed fraud, gets you to trust her, and now what? You're going to give her money? Help her get her papers? She played you. That's not. Of course it is. Victoria's voice rose. This is what you do, Julian. You trust the wrong people. You did it with Trevor, and look where that got you. Now you're doing it again with some desperate immigrant who saw an opportunity and took it. Stop. Julian's voice was quiet but deadly. Stop right there. I'm trying to help you see reality. No. You're trying to poison me against the only person who's actually helped me in months, Julian said. Elena didn't have to say anything. She could have stayed quiet, kept her job, stayed safe. But she spoke up because it was the right thing to do. That's called integrity, Victoria. Maybe you've forgotten what that looks like. The silence that followed was arctic. How dare you, Victoria said finally. I stood by you for 8 years. I supported your obsession with that company. I gave up my career for your ambitions. And when it all fell apart, when you were exposed as a fraud. I'm not a fraud. I was the one who had the sense to get out before you dragged me down with you. Victoria's voice shook. I left because I had to. Because you became someone I didn't recognize. Someone who cared more about money and power than about the people who actually loved you. You left because I stopped being useful to you, Julian said quietly. You loved the billionaire. You didn't love the man. That's not fair, isn't it? You filed for divorce 3 days after the news broke. 3 days, Victoria. You didn't even wait to hear my side of the story. Elena stood frozen in the guest room, her heart pounding. She shouldn't be hearing this. This was private, painful, none of her business. But she couldn't move. I waited for 8 years while you worked 80-hour weeks, Victoria said, and now there were tears in her voice. I waited while you missed dinners and anniversaries, and every moment that mattered. I waited while you became a stranger. So forgive me for not waiting around to watch you self-destruct. I never asked you to wait, Julian said. I asked you to stand beside me. There's a difference. Well, I'm standing here now, Victoria said. And I'm telling you, fire that woman. Cut ties with her before she destroys what's left of your life. Sign the settlement. Take the bankruptcy. Move on. No. Julian, I said no. I'm not signing. I'm not firing Elena. And I'm not taking advice from someone who abandoned me when I needed her most. Fine. Victoria's voice went cold. Then I hope she's worth it. I hope when you're sitting in a prison cell, or deported back to wherever she came from, you remember this moment. Remember that you chose her over common sense, over survival, over everyone who actually cared about you. The only person I'm choosing is myself, Julian said. For the first time in years, I'm choosing to fight back, to stand up. Elena just reminded me how. Footsteps, the sound of heels clicking toward the door. Goodbye, Julian, Victoria said. I tried to help. When this blows up in your face, don't call me. The door slammed. Silence flooded the penthouse. Elena stood in the guest room, her hands trembling. She felt sick, exposed. Your maid, The woman who cleans your toilets, she's using you. Was that what everyone would think? Was that what Julian would eventually think, when the dust settled and he looked at her with clear eyes? She walked out of the guest room on unsteady legs. Julian was standing in the middle of the living room, his hands in his hair, staring at the closed door like he could still see Victoria's ghost there. "I'm sorry," Elena said quietly. Julian spun around, and the look on his face was raw. "How much did you hear?" "Enough." Elena's voice shook. "She's right, you know. About me. I'm a liability. I'm undocumented. Uneducated. Not even American. I'm everything they'll use against you. And maybe I should just go, before I make things worse." "Don't," Julian said sharply. "Don't you dare let her poison you against yourself. She's not wrong though, is she?" Elena's voice broke. "I am the maid. I do clean toilets. That's not an insult, it's just the truth. And maybe I don't belong in your world. Maybe I was stupid to think I could help." "Stop." Julian crossed the space between them in 3 strides. "Elena, look at me." She did, reluctantly, and saw fury in his eyes, but not at her. "For her, you are not just a maid," he said fiercely. "You are a woman who gave up her career, her country, her daughter, to give your family a better life. You are someone who speaks 3 languages, who understands complex legal documents, who had the courage to speak up when no one else would. You are brilliant and brave and the best person I've met in years. And if Victoria can't see that, if the lawyers can't see that, if the whole damn city can't see that, then they're blind." "But she's right about one thing," Elena whispered. "I'm not like you. I'm not from your world. And when this is over, you'll go back to that world, and I'll go back to mine, and nothing will have changed." "Everything's already changed," Julian said. "Don't you see that? You changed it. You changed me." "For how long?" Elena asked, and the question came from some deep, wounded place inside her. "How long before you forget me again? Before I'm invisible again? Before I'm just the woman who cleans your house and you can't even remember my name?" Julian flinched, like she'd struck him. "Is that what you think? That I could forget you?" "I think that people like me are easy to forget," Elena said. "We're everywhere and nowhere. We're the ones who clean your offices and watch your children and cook your food. And you look through us like we're ghosts. And maybe for a moment, when we're useful, you see us, but then the moment passes and we disappear again." "You're not disappearing," Julian said desperately. "I won't let you disappear." "You can't promise that." Elena's voice rose, frustration and fear spilling over. "You can't promise me anything. Your life is falling apart, Julian. Your ex-wife is right. We're probably going to lose. The lawyers will bury us. They'll find out about my visa status and use it against us. They'll paint me as some gold digger trying to exploit you. And when it all falls apart, when you realize this was a mistake—" "It's not a mistake," Julian interrupted. "You'll regret trusting me. You'll regret listening to me. And you'll go back to your life, and I'll go back to mine, and this will all have been for nothing." "Stop it." Julian's hands found her shoulders, gentle but firm. "Elena, stop. You're not listening. I'm trying to be realistic." "You're trying to run," Julian said, "because you're scared. Because Victoria got in your head and made you doubt yourself. But I'm not Victoria. I'm not going to abandon you. I'm not going to forget you. I couldn't if I tried." "How do you know?" Elena whispered. "Because you're the first person in 3 years who's looked at me and seen me," Julian said. "Not the billionaire. Not the CEO. Not the scandal. Or the money. Or the empire. Just me. Julian. The man who can't tie his own tie anymore, who eats bodega sandwiches like they're manna from heaven, who's terrified and alone and trying not to fall apart." Elena felt tears spill down her cheeks. "I see all of that. I know you do, and I see you too, Elena. Not the maid, not the immigrant, not the woman who's supposed to be invisible. I see the mother who sacrifices everything for her daughter. The woman who's brilliant and brave and so damn stubborn she makes me look flexible. The person who saved my life by speaking 3 words. That number's wrong." "What if it wasn't enough?" Elena asked. "What if I was wrong, and we lose everything?" "Then we lose everything together." Julian said simply. And we figure out what comes next. Together. I don't know how to do that, Elena admitted. I've been alone for so long. I've had to be strong alone. I don't know how to let someone else carry part of the weight. Neither do I, Julian said. But maybe that's what we learn. Together. The word hung between them together, and it felt like a promise neither of them knew how to keep. Elena pulled away, wiping her tears. I need air. I need to think. Elena, please, she said. I need a minute. She grabbed her coat and walked out of the penthouse, leaving Julian standing alone in the wreckage of his living room. And she didn't look back, because if she did, she'd fall apart completely. Outside, Manhattan was alive with evening traffic and crowds, and the indifferent hum of 8 million lives being lived. Elena walked without direction, her mind spinning. Victoria's words echoed, "She's using you. She played you." Was that what everyone would think? Was that what Julian would eventually believe? And even if it wasn't true, even if everything Julian said was genuine and real, what future could they possibly have? He was a billionaire, or would be again, if they won. She was undocumented, working 2 minimum-wage jobs, one misstep away from deportation. The distance between them wasn't just about money or class. It was about worlds that didn't touch, lives that didn't intersect, except in the most transactional ways. He was right that she'd changed him. But the question that terrified her was simpler. For how long? How long before he realized she was just a woman who'd pointed out a number? How long before the gratitude faded and reality set in? How long before she became invisible again? Elena walked for hours, and when she finally stopped, she found herself at a small church in Midtown. Not her church, just a church, any church. She slipped inside and sat in the last pew, staring at the votive candles flickering in the darkness. She'd spoken up because it was right. But maybe Victoria was right about one thing. Maybe Elena had no business being in Julian's life. Maybe her presence there would only make things worse. Maybe the bravest thing she could do was walk away. Julian sat alone in his penthouse, watching the city lights flicker to life as night fell, and felt more lost than he'd been the day he'd almost signed his life away. Elena had left 3 hours ago, and she hadn't answered his texts. He'd sent 4, not demanding, just worried. Are you okay? Please let me know you're safe. I'm sorry. Please come back. Nothing. His phone rang, and for a heart-stopping moment he thought it was Elena. But the screen showed Margaret Chen. Tell me you have good news, Julian said, by way of greeting. Mixed news, Margaret said. The State Bar is opening an investigation into Richard Morrison. That's the good news. The bad news is that Marcus Levine's firm got wind of it. They're circling the wagons, and Julian, they know about Elena. Julian's blood went cold. Know what about Elena? Her immigration status. Someone, probably Richard, possibly Victoria, tipped them off. They're preparing to file a motion to exclude her testimony on the grounds that she's an unreliable witness with criminal immigration violations. That's insane. It's legal strategy, Margaret said grimly. They're going to paint her as someone with everything to gain by helping you. They'll argue she's lying to secure your gratitude and financial support for her visa situation. It's ugly, but it might work. Julian felt rage burn through his exhaustion. So what do? We have 2 options, Margaret said. Option 1. Elena steps back. Doesn't testify. We build the case on the documents alone. The email chains. The referral agreement. The evidence you found. It's weaker without her, but it protects her from deportation proceedings. And option 2? She testifies. We put her on the stand, let her tell her story, and bet that a jury believes her. But Julian, if we do that, we're putting a target on her back. ICE could get involved. She could be detained. Deported. And there's nothing I can do to stop that. Julian closed his eyes. Has anyone asked Elena what she wants? I tried calling her. No answer. That's why I'm calling you. Where is she? I don't know, Julian admitted. We had a fight. Sort of. My ex-wife showed up. Said some horrible things about Elena. And Elena left. She's been gone for hours. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Julian, I need to know if you're prepared for the possibility that Elena decides to walk away. that she chooses her safety over this case. Of course I'm prepared, Julian said. It's the smart choice. The right choice. I'd never ask her to risk her life for me. But I hope she doesn't, Julian admitted quietly. Not because I need her testimony. Because I need her. And that's completely selfish and unfair. And I hate myself for it. But it's the truth. That's called caring about someone, Margaret said gently. It's not selfish, it's human. It feels selfish. Most real feelings do, Margaret sighed. Listen, I'll keep building the case on the documents. But you need to find Elena. You need to tell her all of this, the risks, the options, everything. And then, you need to let her decide. Whatever she chooses, you support it. Can you do that? Yes, Julian said, if I can find her. Then start looking. After Margaret hung up, Julian stood in the middle of his empty penthouse and tried to think like Elena. Where would she go? Not home. Her apartment was tiny, depressing. She'd told him that much. Not work, she'd already called out of her hospital shift. Church, maybe? He grabbed his coat and wallet, his card still didn't work, but he had some emergency cash he'd found in a drawer and headed for the elevator. Elena had been sitting in the church for 2 hours when her phone finally died. She'd watched it buzz with Julian's texts, each one making her heart hurt a little more, but she hadn't been ready to respond, hadn't known what to say. Now, the screen was black, and she was alone with her thoughts and the flickering candles and a decision that felt impossible. Stay and fight, risk everything. Or walk away, stay safe, stay invisible. 3 years ago, she would have walked away without hesitation. 3 years ago, survival was the only thing that mattered. But sitting here now, she realized that survival and living weren't the same thing. She'd survived for 3 years. But had she lived? You look troubled, Hija. Elena looked up, an older woman, maybe 70, with kind eyes and a worn rosary in her hands, had sat down beside her. I am, Elena admitted in Spanish. I have to make a choice, and both options feel wrong. Tell me, the woman said simply. And Elena did. She told this stranger everything about Julian, about the fraud, about speaking up, about Victoria's words, and her own fears, and the impossible distance between who she was and who Julian needed her to be. The woman listened without interruption, her fingers moving over her rosary beads, and when Elena finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Do you know the story of Esther? The woman asked finally. From the Bible? Yes. She was a young woman who became queen, but hid her identity because it was dangerous. And when her people were threatened, when she had the chance to speak up and save them, she was terrified. Because speaking up meant revealing herself. Meant risking everything. What did she do? Her uncle told her something wise. He said, perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this. Perhaps everything in her life, every hard thing, every sacrifice had been preparing her for that moment. The old woman squeezed Elena's hand. Maybe you were put in that penthouse for such a time as this, Hija. Maybe all your training in Guatemala, all your years of sacrifice, all your strength. Maybe it was all preparing you for the moment when you would see what no one else could see and have the courage to speak. But what if I lose everything? Elena whispered. What if you gain everything? The woman countered. Not money, not papers, but something more important, the knowledge that you stood up, that you refused to be invisible, that you taught your daughter, by example, what courage looks like. Elena felt tears slip down her cheeks. I'm so scared. Of course you are. Only fools aren't scared. But bravery isn't the absence of fear, Mija. It's choosing to act in spite of it. The woman stood to leave, but paused. One more thing. This man, Julian. Do you care about him? Elena hesitated, then nodded. Yes. I don't know how it happened, but yes. Then, fight for him, the woman said simply. Not because he's a billionaire, or because he can help you, but because love, real love, is always worth fighting for, even when we're scared. Especially when we're scared. She walked away, leaving Elena alone with flickering candles, and a decision that suddenly felt less impossible. Julian found her at the church just after 8 p.m. He saw her through the window, a silhouette in the last pew, head bowed, still as stone. He pushed through the heavy doors and walked down the aisle, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Elena looked up when he sat beside her. How did you find me? She asked. I checked 7 churches, Julian admitted. This was number 5. Despite everything, Elena smiled. You walked all over Midtown looking for me? I would have walked all over New York, Julian said simply. Elena, I talked to Margaret. She told me about the motion, about ice, about the risks. And I need you to know, you don't have to do this. You can walk away, right now. I'll understand. I'll help you however I can, but I won't ask you to sacrifice your safety for my case. And if I want to? Elena asked quietly. Julian looked at her, really looked at her. And she saw fear, and hope, and something deeper warring in his eyes. Then I'll stand beside you, no matter what happens. No matter what they throw at us. You won't face this alone. Promise? I promise, Julian said. Elena, I know we've only really known each other for a few days. I know this is crazy and fast and makes no logical sense, but I meant what I said earlier. You changed me. You made me remember who I wanted to be. And whatever happens next, whether we win or lose, whether we end up together or apart, I will never forget you. I will never let you be invisible again. Elena took his hand, threading her fingers through his. I talked to a woman here. She reminded me of something important. What's that? That I wasn't put in your life by accident. That maybe everything I've been through, all the pain, all the sacrifice, all the years of being invisible, maybe it was all preparing me for this moment, for the chance to speak up, to be seen, to fight back. What are you saying? Elena turned to face him fully, her dark eyes blazing with decision. I'm saying I'm not walking away. I'm testifying. I'm fighting. With you. Elena, I know the risks, she interrupted. I know what could happen. But I also know what will happen if I don't fight. I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have made a difference. I'll teach my daughter that when things get hard, we run, we hide, we make ourselves small. And I don't want that for her. I want her to know that her mother stood up, that her mother was brave. Julian pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and Elena let herself sink into the embrace. Let herself be held. Let herself be seen. We're going to win this, Julian said into her hair. I don't know how, but we're going to win. Maybe, Elena said. Or maybe we'll lose, but at least we'll lose together. They sat in the church for a long time, holding each other, gathering strength for the battle ahead. And when they finally stood to leave, Elena felt different, lighter. Like she'd put down a weight she'd been carrying for years. She was done being invisible. She was done being afraid. Whatever came next, victory or defeat, freedom or deportation, together or apart, she would face it standing up. She would face it seen. 72 hours later, Elena stood in a conference room in the New York State Attorney General's office, and the world felt like it was holding its breath. The room was cold, sterile, filled with lawyers in expensive suits, who looked at her like she was a curiosity, a specimen to be examined. Margaret sat beside her, a steady presence, while Julian sat across the table. Their eyes met, and he nodded once. You've got this. The lead prosecutor, a woman named Sandra Kim, with sharp eyes and sharper questions, leaned forward. Miss Morales, let's start at the beginning. How did you first notice the discrepancy in Mr. Arvam Harth's settlement documents? Elena took a breath and told the truth. All of it. She told them about cleaning Julian's penthouse for 3 years, about being invisible, a ghost in his life, about reading the news on the subway because it was better than thinking about how much she missed her daughter, about seeing the settlement documents that day, seeing the number $847 million, and knowing immediately that it was wrong. I worked in legal for 6 years in Guatemala City, she said, her voice steady. I understand contract structure. I understand fraud cases. And I'd read about Mr. Harth's case extensively. The fraud amount was $684 million, not $847 million. And you brought this to Mr. Harth's attention minutes before he was scheduled to sign? Yes, at 2:47 p.m., 13 minutes before the scheduled signing. Sandra Kim exchanged glances with her colleague. Miss Morales, you understand that by coming forward with this testimony, you're potentially exposing yourself to immigration consequences? I understand, Elena said. And yet you're still here. Because the truth matters more than my fear, Elena said simply. For the next 3 hours, They questioned her. They showed her documents, asked her to explain her analysis, tested her knowledge of legal terminology. They asked about her relationship with Julian, whether he'd promised her anything, whether she had financial motives for her testimony. Elena answered every question honestly. Yes, Julian had promised to help her with immigration lawyers. Yes, she cared about him as a friend, as a person, as someone who'd finally seen her as human. No, she wasn't doing this for money or papers or any kind of deal. I'm doing this because Richard Morrison committed fraud, Elena said. And because if I stayed silent, he'd get away with it. And that's wrong. When they finally dismissed her, Elena's hands were shaking, but her head was high. Margaret walked her out, while Julian stayed behind to give his own testimony. In the hallway, Margaret squeezed her shoulder. You were brilliant in there, she said. Absolutely brilliant. Did we win? Elena asked. We will, Margaret said. Give it time. The next morning, Elena woke in Julian's guest room. She'd been staying there for the past 3 days, too exhausted and too invested to go home to the sound of Julian shouting from the living room. She ran out, terrified something was wrong, and found him staring at his laptop, tears streaming down his face. Julian, what happened? He turned to her, and his smile was incandescent. They're dropping the charges, all of them. The AG's office is filing criminal fraud charges against Richard Morrison and Marcus Levine instead. Elena, we won. We actually won. Elena's knees went weak. What? Your testimony was the key. They compared the original settlement proposal with the final version and found evidence that Richard and Marcus had been running this scheme for years, inflating settlements, splitting the extra fees. You exposed an entire conspiracy. Elena, you didn't just save me. You saved dozens of other people they'd been defrauding. Elena sat down hard on the couch. I did that? You did that, Julian confirmed. He knelt in front of her, taking her hands. And there's more. The AG's office wants to meet with you about a special visa, the U visa. It's for victims and witnesses of crimes who cooperate with law enforcement. It's a path to legal status, to a green card. Elena couldn't breathe. They want to help me? They're going to help you, Julian said. Because you helped them. Elena, you're not getting deported. You're staying. Legally. The tears came then, huge, gasping sobs that Elena couldn't control. Years of fear, years of hiding, years of being one wrong move away from losing everything. It all came pouring out. Julian pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried, his own tears falling into her hair. It's over, he whispered. The nightmare is over. For both of us, Elena managed through her tears. For both of us, he agreed. 2 weeks later, Julian's assets were unfrozen. The board of Hearth Technologies issued a formal apology and reinstated him as CEO. His accounts lit up with funds, his properties were returned, and the empire he'd built came back to life. But the first thing he did before restoring his company, before reclaiming his penthouse, before anything else, was book 2 tickets to Guatemala City. Elena stood in the airport terminal, her hands shaking as she gripped her boarding pass. Beside her, Julian carried both their bags, refusing to let her carry anything. Are you ready? He asked gently. To see Maria? Elena's voice cracked. I've been ready for 3 years. The flight was endless. Elena couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything except her daughter's face. Julian held her hand through the turbulence, through the waiting, through the agony of knowing she was getting closer but wasn't there yet. When they finally landed in Guatemala City, when they finally pulled up to her mother's small yellow house, when Elena finally saw Maria standing in the doorway, 12 years old now, so much taller than in the videos, her face a mirror of Elena's own, everything else disappeared. Mommy? Maria's voice was small, disbelieving. Mi amor, Elena choked out. I'm home. I'm finally home. Maria flew down the steps and into her mother's arms, and they both collapsed on the ground, holding each other, crying, 3 years of distance, dissolving in an instant. Elena breathed in her daughter's hair, felt her solid weight, and thought her heart might burst from the fullness of it. You came back, Maria sobbed. You really came back. Always, Elena promised. I will always come back to you. Julian stood back, giving them space, his own eyes wet. Elena looked up at him over Maria's head and mouthed 2 words. Thank you. He shook his head gently. No, thank you. 3 months later, Elena stood in a different courthouse, not as a witness this time, but as a student. She'd enrolled in law school at Columbia University. Julian had offered to pay for everything: tuition, books, living expenses, but Elena had insisted on taking loans for tuition. "I'll pay for my education," she'd said firmly, "but I'll accept help with rent." They'd compromised. Elena and Maria now lived in a beautiful two-bedroom apartment in Morningside Heights, paid for by Julian until Elena graduated and could afford it herself. Her mother had moved to New York too, finally able to afford the medical care she needed. Elena worked part-time at Margaret Chen's law firm as a paralegal. Margaret had hired her immediately after the trial ended. No more cleaning houses, no more night shifts, no more invisibility. And Julian was rebuilding his company, but differently this time. With transparency, with ethics, with a focus on the people, not just the profits. He'd created a foundation to help undocumented workers facing legal issues. Elena sat on the board. They had dinner together 3 times a week. Elena, Maria, Julian, and sometimes Margaret. They'd become a strange, patchwork family, built not on blood but on something stronger: mutual respect, genuine care, and the memory of the day they'd saved each other. Were they in love? Elena didn't know yet. Maybe. Probably. But they were taking it slow, building something real, on a foundation of friendship and trust. There was no rush. They had time. Today, Elena was in court to watch the sentencing of Richard Morrison and Marcus Levine. Both men had been convicted of fraud, conspiracy, and legal malpractice. Both were facing significant prison time. As the judge read the sentence, 8 years for Richard, 10 for Marcus, Elena felt no joy in their punishment. Just relief. Just the knowledge that justice, sometimes, actually worked. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. They wanted to talk to Julian, the billionaire who'd fought back and won. But he guided them toward Elena instead. "She's the real story," he said. "Elena Morales, the woman who saw what needed to be seen and had the courage to speak up. She's the hero here, not me." Elena stood in front of the microphones, no longer afraid of being seen, no longer trying to make herself small. "I'm just a woman who noticed a number was wrong," she said. "But I want other people in my situation to know your voice matters, your intelligence matters. Whether you're a maid or a CEO, whether you're documented or undocumented, whether you have power or not, when you see something wrong, you speak up. Because that's how we change things. That's how we make the world better. One voice at a time." The reporters scribbled notes. Cameras flashed. But Elena wasn't looking at them. She was looking at Maria, standing beside Julian, her daughter's face glowing with pride. "That's my mom?" Maria would later tell her friends. She saved a billionaire. She took down corrupt lawyers. She fought back when everyone told her to stay quiet. "That's my mom." And Elena, who'd spent 3 years being invisible, who'd sacrificed everything for her daughter's future, finally understood what she'd been teaching Maria all along. You don't have to be powerful to be brave. You don't have to be rich to matter. You just have to be willing to stand up, speak out, and refuse to let the world make you small. 6 months after that, on a Saturday afternoon in Central Park, Julian and Elena sat on a bench watching Maria play soccer with other kids from her school. The autumn sun was warm, the leaves were turning gold, and the city hummed with life all around them. "I have something for you," Julian said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. "If this is another check," Elena started, but Julian cut her off with a laugh. "It's not a check, just open it." Elena opened the envelope and pulled out a single piece of paper. It took her a moment to understand what she was looking at. Then, her hands started shaking. "This is, Julian, this is an official job offer," he finished. "Chief Legal Counsel for the Hearth Foundation. Full-time position, starting after you graduate law school. Salary commensurate with experience, which, yes, includes your 6 years in Guatemala City. Full benefits, and a signing bonus that should cover any student loans you insisted on taking out." Elena stared at him, tears in her eyes. "You're offering me a job? At your foundation?" "I'm offering you the job you've always deserved," Julian said. "The job you were meant to have before life got in the way. Elena, you're brilliant. You're dedicated. You understand justice in a way most lawyers never will. I want you on my team. Not because I owe you, though I do, but because you're the best person for the position. I haven't even graduated yet. The offer stands, Julian said firmly. Take your time, finish school, pass the bar, and when you're ready, the job will be waiting. Elena looked at the paper, at the numbers that would change her life, at the title that meant she wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. She was becoming who she'd always been meant to be. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, Julian said back. For saving my life, for reminding me what matters, for being my friend. Is that what we are? Elena asked, a small smile playing at her lips. Friends? Julian smiled back, and there was something warm and uncertain and hopeful in his eyes. I think we're whatever we want to be, and we have all the time in the world to figure it out. Elena leaned her head on his shoulder, watching her daughter laugh and play, and thought about how far she'd come, from invisible maid to law student. From terrified immigrant to legal counsel. From woman who cleaned houses to woman who'd exposed corporate fraud and changed lives. But more than that, from invisible to seen. From silent to heard. From small to exactly the right size. Hey Julian, she said quietly. Yeah? I'm glad you never learned my name. He pulled back, confused. What? That day, Elena explained. If you'd known my name, if you'd seen me as human from the start, maybe I never would have spoken up. Maybe I would have been too intimidated, too aware of the power difference. But because I was invisible, I had nothing to lose. And that made me brave. Julian was quiet for a moment. So being invisible saved us both? Maybe, Elena said, but I'm glad I'm not invisible anymore. Me too, Julian said. He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. And they sat together, watching Maria play. Watching the autumn leaves fall. Watching the city move around them. Two people who'd found each other at the edge of disaster. Two people who'd saved each other by refusing to look away. Two people who'd learned that sometimes the smallest voice can change everything if someone is brave enough to speak, and someone else is brave enough to listen. Thank you for seeing me, Elena said. Thank you for letting me, Julian replied. And in the warm afternoon sun, with Maria's laughter ringing out and the whole future spreading before them like an open road, they sat together, no longer billionaire and maid, no longer employer and employee, just Julian and Elena, and knew that whatever came next, they'd face it the same way they'd faced everything else. Together, standing up, refusing to be invisible. And that was enough. That was everything. Elena's story reminds us that our voices matter no matter who we are or where we come from. Have you ever been made to feel invisible? Have you ever found the courage to speak up when it mattered most? Drop your story in the comments. Your experience could inspire someone else to find their voice. Let's build a community where everyone is seen, everyone is heard, and everyone matters.